Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Culture and Conversation, where we discuss how culture is experienced in everyday life. My name is Chan-Hoong. I'm the host of the podcast, and today I'm privileged to have John Barry, Professor Emeritus of Psychology from Queen's University at Kingston, Canada. Welcome to the podcast, John. How are you today?
I am well, thanks. And you?
I'm good. Thank you, John. Thank you. Lovely day. John, we often look at you fondly and we always remember you as the grandfather of acculturation psychology. You are such a distinguished scholar that we always look up on you, for research on migration, multiculturalism, and acculturation, not just in Canada, but also pretty much from the rest of the world. So I'm going to start by asking you a question about the state of multiculturalism and intercultural relations. I say this because, as you can see, from the headline news that we read every day, we live in a very precarious time. And apart from the conflict, the armed conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East, we do see an unprecedented level of tensions, nationalism, cultural animosity, tribal divisions within societies, be that about immigration, be that about, you know, um, religion or ethnicity between different communities. And this is so in spite of the many decades of education, cultural education, interactions, and cross-cultural immersion. So my question is pretty straightforward. Uh, in your view, is multiculturalism dead, and why can't we get along?
Well, to answer that, we need to understand what we mean by the concept of multiculturalism. In our early work in the 70s, we distinguished three different facets. One is the demographic fact that many different peoples of different heritages are attempting to live together in culturally plural societies. That fact is obvious, it's present, and it's not going to go away. So, in that sense, it's not dead, it's probably going to increase. The second facet of multiculturalism is the way in which a society and its institutions attempt to understand and manage that demographic diversity. Uh, they come up with policies, practices, programs, including, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, most recently, to try to help smooth the relationships amongst these demographically different communities. And the third facet is what people on the ground think about it, that what we call multicultural ideology. And the questions being posed there are, do you think that cultural diversity is good for your society? What do you think the impact will be? Do you enjoy engaging with people of other cultures as a way of dealing with this diversity? So that's the first point. Multiculturalism means three different things at three different levels. The second point is that in 1971, as you know, the Canadian government introduced its first policy of multiculturalism. So that early statement, I think, gives us in Canada the right to define multiculturalism in a particular way. That policy statement laid out two core principles. The first is that the government and its institutions will seek to promote the maintenance of heritage cultures by people and communities to the extent that they wish. It's not required, but it's given space and a sense of confidence and security in being who they have been and may wish to continue to be. So that's essentially the diversity component of multiculturalism. Often forgotten is the second component, which is equally important, and that is the promotion of intergroup contact and sharing amongst all of the cultural communities that continue to exist. So, in this sense, it's both multicultural and intercultural, and this is often forgotten, the second principle. So, in recent years, we've heard that multiculturalism is dead or multiculturalism has failed. And those statements come from countries where the second principle has been totally ignored. And
mm,
in its place has cropped up this notion of interculturalism that puts more emphasis on the second component than on the first. But in the original policy, both components had equal emphasis. But while we're talking or mentioning interculturalism, I'd like to mention a crucial difference between multiculturalism and interculturalism. Multiculturalism considers all cultures to be equally valid ways of living within a common shared civic framework. Interculturalism is hierarchical in that it gives priority or precedence to the views and ways of living of the dominant society. And we see many examples of societies moving in this direction in Europe and in many other countries as well. And here at home in Quebec, interculturalism is now the official policy, giving precedence and priority to the French culture and language. They claim, and I think rightly, that it needs to be promoted in order to maintain their presence because they are declining in the overall population. On the other hand, the consequence of giving priority or preference, it creates a caste-like system where some people are devalued and threatened in their attempts to live they want.
mm,
So we'll come back to the notion of threat and security later, I hope.
mm, mm. So you talk about the second component that is somewhat lacking. So does it mean that the quality of interaction is probably not as ideal? And the fact that you may have diversity or increasing diversity, but the level of engagement doesn't quite lead to that meaningful understanding of diverse community. Is that the point about the reason why the focus on diversity alone hasn't quite produced what we think is important, to living together?
Yeah, the recent project that I coordinated called Mutual Intercultural Relations in Plural Societies laid out three hypotheses to be evaluated. That speaks to your question. And the first refers back to the issue of security or confidence. And we call that the multiculturalism hypothesis. It says or proposes that when people feel secure and confident in their place in the plural society, then they will be psychologically in a position to accept those who differ from themselves. This is actually a statement from the original 1971 policy. And we have evaluated that in Canada and in 13 or 14 other countries and generally find support. The
Mm,
opposite has emerged more recently as the threat hypothesis, that when you threaten people, you undermine their sense of confidence in living in that society, and you create a situation where people do not accept each other. So
mm,
one of the issues that we have to deal with is allowing people to live the way they want without feeling that they're being undermined. And this brings us back to the threat component of interculturalism, where some people are devalued.
mm,
The second principle that being investigated in that project is also something you've mentioned, that's integration. The integration hypothesis proposes that when people have their feet in and their heads in their own culture and in that of the larger society, then they have more resources available to succeed in their new lives, whether they're immigrants or second or third generation. And we know from research on multiple identities that those are an advantage in a society that is culturally plural. Having many ways of living, learning, and being competent in these ways allows you to succeed better. So that is essentially what we mean by integration. And the third you've already mentioned, that's contact, intercultural contact. We know from 50 years of research that in general, contact between groups and their individual members generally leads to more positive mutual acceptance. but under certain conditions. And the one condition that seems to be most important right now is equal status, power differentials. So when you have some societies saying, our group has more power than yours, as in interculturalism, then contact is unlikely to lead to more positive relations. Or on the international scene, when a country says, we want to dominate you, we want your resources, we're going to annex you, and you know all of the examples of these right now, will lead to a sense of insecurity, and that under those conditions, contact is unlikely to lead to improved intercultural relations. So these all flow from the original policy statement in 1971, and I think are generally valid in contemporary research. So that's multiculturalism and security, uh, multiple identities and integration, and contact leading to greater mutual acceptance.
Mm. You know, John, is interesting because I think a while ago you talk about interculturalism and you talk about the retreat to a majoritarian culture. And you know, I'm just wondering at the back of my mind, you know, whether that retreat to your own, or rather to the retreat to a majoritarian way of life, is this also a function of how the texture of the society has changed in a sense that you have huge hyper diversity that evolve, you know, as a result of migration, as a result of society becoming more complex over the decades. And of course, you know, that diversity, that hyper multiculturalism, if you like, has changed as a result of global migration. So, I mean, just, you know, out of curiosity, I mean, what do you think, you know, that retreat to the majoritarian culture, the interculturalism push, is this partly a function of how society has changed because it's become very diverse, or is it does it go back to the point that you mentioned about feeling threatened, you know, feeling underwhelmed or overwhelmed, you know, because of the you know, the alien, you know, values and potential threat that you experience. What is your take on that?
Yeah. Well, I think you put your finger on the key point, and that is the sense of security that is being undermined when people who are already resident in a society see increasing numbers of people who are not like themselves, or perhaps people who don't even want to join with them in creating an evolving society. So this, as I mentioned, is the multiculturalism hypothesis, that when people sense that newcomers are interested in joining with them, not assimilating, but becoming part of the larger society that evolves over time, then I think mutual acceptance will follow. But if people feel a sense of threat from arrival, then the push towards promoting your own culture and nationalism. So in Canada right now, we have never been more proud or cohesive than
Mhm.
since the guy to the south of us started to threaten us. The same happened amongst Greenlanders. We want your country. You're not a real country. Your borders are artificial. We're going to take you over one way or another. That's almost a quote from the guy. Um, it has pushed Canadians more towards cohesiveness and a sense of nationalism, or at least national pride. It hasn't yet erupted in hostility towards others, but has certainly downgraded the appreciation that Canadians have towards US Americans. And not only in Canada, recent international polling shows a massive decline in admiration for and acceptance of the United States by people in almost all over the world. So when one country becomes or insists on being dominant, that threat that's induced by that dominance will lead to hostility, and contact will be not equal status and lead to negative relations.
Mm. I I want to do a bit of a detour and ask you about you know, some of the challenges at a at a macro level. If you look at Canada and the US, for example, both countries have maintained an open door policy to migration for many, many years. And to a large extent, I think a lot of people look at the two countries and see them as role models in how we can foster solidarity and cohesion in the midst of growing diversity because of the migration history. Canadians, of course, have embraced a somewhat different approach. You've taken a more integration strategy to maintaining diversity, while the Americans have favored the colorblind or melting pot principle. Of course, today, we see a very different landscape, and the US is significantly divided and polarized to some, right? And there's also irony considering that the principles of color blindness and assimilation is supposed to forge a singular identity. But yet, otherwise, you look at the US, it's quite different from what the vision of that policy seems to be, right? So, I mean, in your view, what do you think is the main driver that resulted in the erosion of social ties in the US? What are some of the key reasons why the ties social capital has eroded significantly in America?
Well, as you know, my position with respect to the US is to largely ignore it. So I don't want to say something specific to that society. But what we're seeing is with assimilation or colorblind policies, people who want to retain their heritage cultures are finding that they're not seen and they're not being accepted the way they are or want to be, and the cost of participation in the society is to be stripped of their cultural and linguistic characteristics. And this, of course, leads directly to the sense of threat. So I think that assimilation and colorblind policies, and any other policy that de-emphasizes the importance of unique culturally based identities amongst people who want to be recognized as such, will lead to hostility and more division. And that in turn leads to hostility on the part of the dominant people. If you don't like me, I won't like you. If you don't accept me, I'm going to deport you, and so on. So it's a reciprocal hostility that leads to increasing polarization.
Mm. I'm going to stretch your intellectual commentary, John. I want to ask you questions relating to non-Western societies. And as you know, there are many multicultural societies that are also non-Western. Singapore and Malaysia are examples of that. And even when I look around, a lot of the traditional homogeneous societies like Japan and Korea, for instance, they're also opening up to immigration because of the aging population. And when we look at the evidence, when you look at the cultural DNA of the Asian societies or such Asian societies, many are what we consider to be tight cultures. In other words, there's a strong emphasis on social norms, and there's very little tolerance to deviance. The value systems are also quite different. Talk about collectivism and the focus on Confucius values, and also maintaining a sharp hierarchy and power distance in those societies. So, I mean, just your thoughts. I mean, in your view, would increasing immigration and globalization going to be a major source of tension in these countries moving forward? Countries like Japan, Korea, and even Singapore, more than that of European American societies, because after all, Asian societies are relatively speaking more tight compared to the West. What are your thoughts?
Well, we can refer back to those three facets. Demographic diversity is increasing for the reasons you mentioned. The ratio of working people to non-working people with aging is driving the need for immigration, whether short-term on contracts or long-term. And that is not going to change in the direction of lowering threat. It's going to increase the public response more away from policies of segregation and more towards policies of integration and to some extent assimilation, because these people have to find a place, a valuable place in the society, or they won't stay. So workers or immigrants to Japan or Korea or Singapore will leave if they are consistently denied rights and opportunities that are available to others. And then finally, of course, if there is hostility and prejudice, contact is really very limited. And the positive results of contact will not likely result. Yesterday, I reviewed a paper in which the temporary foreign workers in a particular country were reporting that they hardly ever have social interaction with the people who already reside there. And they leads to feelings of exclusion and exploitation. We're here just to help the big guys make money. They don't appreciate us. They don't see us. They don't recognize our cultural contribution to the society. So yeah, it's going to be increasingly an issue for most societies. But as you point out, in societies that are high in tightness, high in power distance, and high in collectivism, will probably have a more difficult transition than those societies that are low on all of those international indicators. There's a research project for you. Test those three hypotheses.
Mm.
High power distance, high collectivism, and high tightness are associated with lower acceptance of immigrants.
Mm.
Get a student to work on it.
I have one final question, if you don't mind me asking, John, and allow me to be the devil's advocate here, right? I mean, would you ever imagine that there will be one society or any particular part of the world where segregation, separation may be a better strategy because there's so much contestations, because there's so much animosity, that it might be even better to separate than to have them mix together. I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I want to ask you this, to pick your brain on that. What do you think, John?
Well, we have lots of examples where that's been tried, whether it's South Africa or currently Israel and Palestine. Build walls, keep people out, restrict their movement, restrict their rights. They are lesser people. Untermenschen in the Hitlerian vocabulary. I don't think there's a single example in the world where this has worked. So building walls to separate people of different cultures, ethnicities, languages, and religions never worked anywhere, and I doubt very much whether it's a policy option. So going back to multiculturalism as policy, every society needs to deal with the demographic diversity. So they're forced, in a sense, to come up with solutions, which we can call policies. And in my work, I believe that the evidence clearly shows that policies that promote integration have superior outcomes than policies that promote separation or segregation or assimilation, or especially marginalization. And that's true in society generally. It's true in universities where I've worked on these issues of diversifying universities, and it's true in business. There are numerous papers that show diverse workforces are more creative, more productive, more happy than those that are either made to be uniform or where people of different backgrounds are kept apart from each other. So I think it's not ever been shown and probably never will be shown that keeping people apart is a way to deal with the demographic diversity in a society.
I think that's very, very insightful, John, and a fantastic way to conclude the conversation. Thank you so much for the insights, John, and we'd love to have you back to the podcast again in future episodes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.